I'd been suffering from kidney stones for 3 months. It was stuck in my back. It wasn't traveling. They kept telling me, wait for it to pass. And I was in and out of the hospital probably 5 times, passing out from the pain, ended up in the emergency room, then finally getting discharged. The day that I went to the healing was, I think, the week that I actually first came to this church. And I heard about the healing, and I thought, well, I'm going to try that. That day, I had been I went into the hospital for really bad pain and passed out. Ended up into an emergency room, and they finally decided they were going to give me morphine for the pain because it was so bad. And they decided that it had been stuck for so long and it's so large that it wasn't going to pass on its own. So they set up an appointment to have me come back and do a CAT scan so that they could check that out for doing operation to take it out. That was kind of scary, but at least finally I had something for the pain. I never actually got to take the pain medication because after I got out of the hospital, I came to the healing place. And they prayed over me. And I opened up about a lot of other things as well that released more pain in me than I realized that I'd had. The pain went away from the kidney stone. And I figured, well, maybe it hasn't moved or something. So then all of a sudden, the next day, no pain. Then I finally go to the appointment, and they did the CAT scan. And they couldn't find the kidney stone that they were supposed to operate to get rid of. And they were asking how much the morphine I took, because if I didn't, I must have been pretty doped up if I didn't feel it pass, and I had never opened the bottle. The kidney stone was completely gone. And a thirst came over me to learn as much as I could of the Lord. And I'd never read a book from cover to cover in my life. I never really had that kind of attention span for things. I read the entire Bible in, I believe it was a week and a half, cover to cover. Then I went and started reading it a second time. And following 2 weeks, I read it that second time completely through, and now I'm working on my third time, and each time I'm getting more out of it. I used to be very shy about talking to people. I was always nervous in crowds and things like that, and I started speaking to people about the Bible. I started feeling comfortable with it. I started going to a little park that was a nice place to go and relax. And I would listen to the Bible on my phone in my ear, and I would carry my Bible with me, and then I would sit down and read some passages. And people started coming up to me asking me about the Bible that I was carrying. I was worried about how was I going to approach people and talk to people about the Lord, and here he was making it easy for me. He was bringing them to me. I started worrying about, am I going to be able to recite some particular verse or tell a story that I read? And I could say just enough, and the other person would take over on all the details. They would actually start reciting the passages themselves that they'd read in the past. And I started going to a local thrift store and buying used Bibles. And I just kept getting more and more, and every time I got them, I would go there and walk around that track there at the park, carry 2 Bibles, mine and another one. And usually, by the time I made it around one trip, somebody had already accepted one of them. I thought, well, this is wonderful. Then one time I went to the store and picked up a couple of Bibles, and one of them was in Chinese. And it was in traditional Chinese, and one was in Japanese. And I'm asking the Lord, what am I going to do with these? How am I going to find a home for these? Well, within that next week, in the course of going to 2 different fast food places, I ran into 2 people that were foreign exchange students sitting with the families that were taking care of them, and they were talking about the Bible. They couldn't read in English, but they could understand and speak English. So they were having a little difficulty being able to study on their own. And in both cases, they accepted the Bible, and they were very happy to accept them. And it was amazing to me that the person that spoke Chinese, it was actually the right dialect, because there's a couple of different dialects for that. So I just constantly pray for the Lord to show me my path, guide my step, guide my heart. And as long as I keep reciting that over and over, the journey is something I'm following and it's leading me. I've been homeless for the past 2 years. I still live in my car. That's one of the reasons that a lot of people out there that I talk to trust me, because they know I've been out there and they know that I've been through a lot of what they've been through, and that I'm working now, and that I'm somebody that's not just trying to show them something to get them into a building. A lot of people are scared to come into the churches for a number of reasons. They're scared that somebody's going to pass a collection plate and they're not going to have anything to put in it, or they're scared that they come into the building and it's a whole bunch of strangers and they're not sure how they're going to be accepted because they're worried about how they're dressed. They worry about problems that they may have that other people are going to pick up on. So in the park setting that I usually go to and I talk to people, they can first feel comfortable. One of the things that the Lord has made me understand clearly is that I have to look at everyone that I meet like they're my brother and sister that I just found. And as long as they feel like they're a member of a family, and I feel like they're a member of my family, it opens the door so that they're relaxed and they're comfortable, and then they can accept the Spirit. The next healing after that was just recently. I was out one night and went and found a homeless person that came to me because he trusted me, and he was trying to get off of drugs and he was going through withdrawals. So I took him to a local hospital and stayed most of the night at the hospital waiting for him to get checked in, because he wanted somebody that he trusted there, and he didn't know who to go to because a lot of the people that he knew were still on drugs. So I got him checked in, and then the next morning I got ready to go to work, and I hadn't had very much sleep. I wasn't quite feeling right. I was starting to get headaches, and I was feeling really weak and dizzy. So I went to another hospital, and then I ended up sitting in that hospital for about 8 hours in the lobby. And I finally got in to see the doctor. They were taking blood and they were running a few tests. And I've been carrying my Bible with me because I bring it with me everywhere I go. And all of a sudden, my hand went numb and my Bible fell to the floor. And then I felt my face feel like I had ants crawling under it or something, and it just felt like it was kind of like melting. My whole arm and leg went numb, and I finally fell to the floor. Luckily, I was in the emergency room at the time, and they called something called a code cold stroke. And everybody come running, and they were all putting needles in me and trying to take blood and tests to see how my vision was and my speech and my memory. And I was a little confused. I was having a hard time trying to figure out what month and what year it was. I couldn't really focus on things because the right side of my face was numb, and it affected the eye on the other side. As the two eyes that try and balance, all of a sudden the good eye started shaking. So I couldn't really read things. I couldn't stand. I couldn't walk. I ended up in the hospital, checked in for them to do more tests, and then they did a CAT scan. I hadn't had the results of that yet, and then they went and they were scheduled an MRI. I was a little heavy for the machine there, so they were going to have to send me to another hospital for that. Then 2 days had gone by that I hadn't been able to feel my right side or stand up or read my Bible, and it was beginning to really scare me. I managed to get my phone charged enough to get a message asking for the church to pray for me. I woke up early on Sunday morning. Well, not really, probably about 8:30 or so on Sunday morning. I'd gotten a text from one of the brothers here telling me about a Bible study before church. And I let him know that I was in the hospital, that I'd had a stroke. And then he said he would pray for me and the church would pray for me. And I went back to sleep. And I woke up probably about noon when they come to draw my blood again. So it was after church had met on Sunday, and when I woke up, I realized that I could feel my arm, and I could feel my leg, and my face didn't feel funny anymore. I was able to stand up and then go to the bathroom, something I hadn't been able to do for 2 days. I still had some balance problems, but my whole right side had been restored. And the problem with my eyes shaking and all of that were gone, and I could finally read my Bible. And from that point on, people just started coming to me, talking to me there in the hospital. I had a chaplain that came by, and he was just saying like a simple prayer with each person. But when he came to me, he started talking to me, and he told me his whole story of how he became a chaplain and how his wife, before she died, had asked him what he was going to do with his life, because so much of the life had been together, and convinced him that would probably be something good to do. I thought it was strange that people were just opening up to me that way. Then a boy was brought into the bed next to me, about 20 years old, and there was a rather large Samoan family that came in with him, and they were very loving to each other, immediately accepted me, and they saw the Bible, and I was talking to them about the Bible. They were fifth-generation ministers, and I didn't realize that. They invited me to pray with their son. Their son had been hit by a car that was doing about 60 miles an hour in a crosswalk. He flew up in the air and rolled, but he didn't have a single broken bone. He came to in the ambulance, but he didn't know where he was, so he was panicking, so they gave him a bunch of morphine. They gave him an adult dose because they didn't realize he was only 20 because of his size. He was about 7 foot tall. Then he got to the hospital. I guess he had come to again, and after he came to the second time, they were stitching his face, and he started panicking, didn't know where he was, and they shot him with more morphine. Well, by the time he got into my room, he'd been unconscious for 2 or 3 days, and they didn't understand why he wasn't waking up. He didn't have any brain damage. He didn't have any physical broken bones or anything, but he also had an armband that wasn't his. They'd mixed up and put somebody else's armband, so he either received someone else's medication or they dosed him again. As I was praying with the family, we all held hands, and I held his hand, and I had just been able to stand, probably only a few hours before that. And when I come here on Sundays, and when I went to the healing place, I could feel the Spirit come over me. It was like a breeze that would just fill you and refresh you. I felt that same thing. And he started moving his thumb and rubbing my hand. I'd never prayed for healing for someone before, and I wasn't sure exactly how to do it. But I was praying with all of my heart, and the whole family was praying with all their heart. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes, and he started talking to his family. He got up, took all the IVs and everything out. Everybody was panicking, and he went into the bathroom. He come back, sat on the bed, laid back down, and went back into a coma. They brought him into another room, so I couldn't pray over him again. But the family just kind of adopted me. They kept coming in and checking on me. And they told me that they do a lot of things out with the homeless and stuff like I do. And they were inviting me to be able to come do it with them, or them come do it with me once in a while. Here, their son was in the hospital in a coma, and they were worried about my spiritual well-being. And they knew that all the time I was in the hospital, no one had visited me, and they just made me a part of their family. And I kept hoping that I'd be able to get back into that room and try and pray over that boy again, but I prayed with them and prayed with them, and I don't know what the outcome is yet. I haven't heard much back from them yet. But that was a pretty amazing thing as well. Yes, I was, but I had some stumbling blocks in my in my past that I wasn't. A long time ago, when I was in my 20s, I'm like 52 now. Was going through a really hard time when my first wife left me. I married my first wife after not even having dated very much. My first wife was 20 years older than me, so I was completely lost as to how to be a strong man. And I completely fell apart when she left me, and I had attempted suicide. Took a bunch of pills, and it actually, I guess they said, died and came back a couple minutes later. I never felt that I could have been forgiven for that. So I kept that, and it kept me from going further. I couldn't really fully accept the Lord because I had something I was holding back. I felt like I could be forgiven anything, but I didn't deserve to be forgiven for that. And that and the fears that I built up over the years of self-doubt just kept me from taking those extra steps. Before I became homeless, I had a nice apartment, made decent wages, paid off all my bills, but I lived like a hermit. After my second wife had left me, for years, I had a job where I would call into work. They would dispatch me out to a place. I'd never see anyone from work. They were just over the phone. I worked 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for years without days off. Constantly just keeping myself busy. So I had no interaction with people. I was moved into an area to live that was better for where distribution of the work was. I didn't even know my neighbors. The only thing I talked to was my dog. So I had what a lot of people would have thought was a comfortable life. But I was miserably lonely. And once that all went away, and I became homeless, the Lord opened up all the people that I'd been avoiding. And I started meeting people and seeing that they wanted to be talked to more than they wanted to be fed. And that kind of started my journey. And when I got to the healing place, it was kind of like, here's the piece that's missing that you need to be able to continue on this journey.
Which was what?
When I was healed of the kidney stone and could finally admit that I had self-doubt and I had fears that were holding me back. And that had more of an effect on me, I think, than losing the pain from the kidney stones, because I finally felt comfortable again. I was always so scared of trying new things because I was always afraid of failing. I was always afraid of letting people in because I was afraid of being hurt. I started convincing myself that I wouldn't take steps to get myself into a better position because I was probably just going to fail anyway. My self-doubt was so immense that I couldn't get out of it. I created my own self-fulfilling prophecy of never being anything. Well, when I was like 17 years old, I got in a car accident, and my mom was in the car, and she almost died in the accident. So after she came out of the hospital and had to go through a bunch of reconstructive surgery on her face and things, I didn't have any memory of the accident, and I know that I'd gotten in trouble for something the week before, and I'd been put on restriction. So my dad thought that we were arguing, and that's why I got in the accident. So I believed that, and I blamed myself for it. So for all the years that everyone else was out going to prom and dating and all that type of stuff, I just took my mom to go do stuff. until I was like 23. Then I met a woman that was 20 years older than me, and before I knew it, I was married, and I had a daughter that was a year older than me. And I'm just trying to start a family. And I had no experience in having a family. So that was where a lot of my doubt stuff started. So that's why I never got to finish school. I could quit school when I was 13 to start helping to take care of my parents, and I was working along that time too. So it was like work and then doing stuff with my mom, and I never really developed any of that kind of life. And I never really got to have the high school diplomas and things that people need now. It used to be I could just walk into any job, learn how to do it, and I got the job. I was a research and development engineer for a Japanese computer manufacturer, and I was like 15 years old. So all my life I got into these technical jobs. And here I was in my 50s, and all of a sudden the company that I worked for got bought by a bigger company. And they decided they were going to let me go because I had stock options they had to pay out $1,000 a month on, and I was making more money than the people that were going to be working on the stuff from that point forward, because I did all the prototypes and worked on all that stuff with the engineers, and they had new ones that they just had one type of machine they could just train thousands of people to work on across the United States. It grew, basically, and it grew beyond me. I didn't have any college degrees. I didn't have a high school diploma. They have to have ISO ratings now for being able to do technical stuff, and everybody's got to have all those credentials. So they let me go, along with a few other people from the company, and other divisions took over those spots. When I went looking for similar work, in the job market the way it was, no one would hire me for the stuff I did unless I went back to school for like 10 or 12 years to be able to get the job I had in time to retire. So then I started looking for minimum wage jobs, just something to be able to bring money in. And everybody was scared to hire me because they thought that I would just quit right away because it was so beneath me. And I just wanted anything. And I'd stayed up in the area where they had moved me to, and it was an area where a lot of people in the movie industry would retire and stuff, and there just wasn't any of those kind of jobs around there. So I just kept going and going and going, not finding things, until I ended up losing everything, ended up in my car, and I finally moved back here where I grew up. I grew up in Carson, and Torrance was kind of the place I did everything when I was a kid. And almost immediately I found a job through a temp agency. And I started at minimum wage, getting my way back up, working on electronic lighting, LED lighting. And then when I got the kidney stones, as soon as the doctor took me off work a couple of days, they just let me go. So then I was unemployed and homeless, living in my car, not knowing how I was going to be able to pay to be able to keep the car. So I was starting back from the bottom again. And after I finally came here and after the healing, things started all coming back together again. I found work, and I have full-time work again. Still minimum wage, but it pays to be able to take care of the car, make sure my insurance, I don't have credit card bills going bad or any of that type of stuff. And I've learned that there's a big difference between what a person needs in life and what a person wants in life. And if you live by the things that you need, and then you put the rest of it into the Lord, the joy fills all the gaps. And all the people that I was meeting when I had nothing, they were still there, and they were still looking for some kind of hope. And when I would show them what I found in the Lord and be able to give somebody a Bible so they had something to read at night, or someone that they could come to and talk to and feel comfortable, every person I met like that, it was like my family was growing and growing and growing. And that life of solitude that was so horrible to me was gone. And it just, that the family keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I still live in my car, but I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. because I can take care of me, and then I can do a little something for them. He's got a purpose for me to be able to show people that what the world does to them is the world. That hope lies with him. That all the things that people keep inside themselves, that keep them down and keep them from holding on to hope, those things are the world. The Lord opens that up for you, shows you the way out, shows you the way to be happy with what you have, and to be able to take the steps and keep moving forward, to be able to come out of that hole. And that the family that he gives you is so much better than all the things that people collect and spend their lives worrying about losing. I used to worry about losing everything I had. And once I gave away everything I had because I realized that I was going to be going somewhere that I probably wouldn't be able to keep it, and found people that needed the things, I got more joy out of the things when I gave them to people that had a purpose for them. The thing that I had the most difficulty at first was I kept thinking, well, there's somebody over there, I should run over there and talk to them. But you want to run as soon as you get the Spirit in you, and you got to realize that you're still a baby trying to crawl, you're trying to run. You're going to stumble or you're going to scare them away. The first thing that you have to do is you have to realize that this is a person that's probably just as scared as you are. And you got to approach them like a friend, not like somebody that's coming over and telling them this is how you're going to change your entire life. People that are in those situations are scared, and they're scared of trying new things, just like I was scared of trying new things. And they got to feel comfortable with you. And once they feel comfortable with you, and then they see the joy that you have in you, then they're thirsty for that. And then that's when you feed them. Well, it used to be that you had people that would get involved in drugs, or they would they just decide that they were on unemployment and they kind of liked getting money coming in. And that's the way things used to be. But what ended up happening in a lot of cases were they would have groups of people that would come in from other countries that would get like, not just like, you got a whole family would get together and buy a business or buy a apartment complex or something, and then they pool their money, which was a very smart thing to do. But then all of a sudden, people couldn't afford to live there anymore that were already living there. And then when the economy would start getting worse and they'd get laid off, and the job they had that was making a lot of money, suddenly they had to replace with another job, they were scared to move to the places that they could be. They might have a nice car, and they're used to where they were at, and they felt safe there. So, yeah, they could move to some neighborhood that they were completely scared of everyone, or they could go live in their car. Some people would start out living in their car, and something would happen to their car, and then all of a sudden they're on the street. And as soon as they get to the point where everything they have is in a backpack, and the first time they sit it down, it's gone, and they got nothing. It's kind of like, it's not like people just fall into homelessness. It's like one step at a time. Some people are right at the edge of the cliff holding on. They've fallen over the first ledge, but they know that there's something worse down there below them, and they're not completely sure what to do. And then they find people that may have been out there for a while that are involved in drugs or alcohol or whatever, and then they start coming to those people because they don't know what to do by themselves. And the advice that they get is not good advice, and then all of a sudden they get caught up in things that they can't get themselves out of. They all of a sudden they got a criminal record, or they've got some type of drug problem they're trying to get rid of, or they parked their car someplace that they weren't supposed to park overnight, and it got towed, and now they lost their car. And there's so many laws now about even sleeping in your car. The first thing I did when I became homeless was I went to the police and I says, there's a really good chance I'm going to be living in my car until I find another place to live. And I don't want to be breaking any laws, and I want to know what can I do. Well, you're not allowed to park on residential streets. to sleep overnight in your car. You're not allowed to park close to schools or churches. Churches kind of surprised me, but I understood why. Because a lot of churches have schools with children, and there are a lot of homeless people that have drug problems and stuff. You never know what kind of situation you're going to expose the children to. So basically, if you wanted to sleep in your car overnight anywhere in Los Angeles County, it had to be between 9 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning in a business parking lot, but it wasn't posted. Most businesses post no overnight parking. Places like Walmart, Walmart neighborhood markets, a lot of people sleep in their parking lots because Walmart has got stores all across the United States, and there's some areas where people go and they'd come in their Winnebagos and they would camp overnight. And it's just kind of an unwritten rule. That's the place you can go. And I noticed this, people in Mercedes and Audis that are parking in the same parking lot as me, they've got a good job, but they can't live the lifestyle they had, and they don't want to live in the bad neighborhood. And they're just one step from sliding down. Some people don't want to accept help. Some people get a minimum wage job, and if you're working a minimum wage job and you're working 40 hours a week, you make too much money to get food stamps. You fall out of a lot of the programs for being able to get health care and stuff. Then you're required to buy a health care. Health care costs a lot of money. Once you're out on this and you're living in your car, a lot of what you eat is fast food because you can't keep anything fresh. Fast food costs so much money, you end up spending as much money as rent would cost. You can't save anything to get first and last. And the longer you're out there, the harder it is to get somebody to rent to you. And when they finally get to the point where a social worker is going to help them, they want to put them in a group home somewhere in a really bad neighborhood with people that have got drug problems or been released from prison, and they're scared of the whole situation. Some people have just lived by themselves for a long time because they don't trust people. There's a lot of different reasons why people become homeless, but it's getting harder and harder for people to find their way out of becoming homeless. They need to find some avenue that they can start working. They start taking the steps one by one and not listen to the people that tell them, oh, you're just working so hard at this and nothing's ever going to change. They need positive voices.
What does your personal time with the Lord look like?
What the Lord has done in my life is nothing short of amazing. Even when I ended up in the hospital with a stroke, paralyzed for 2 days, He strengthened my faith and used me to be able to give other people comfort. He uses me everywhere I am. I never ask why anything happens to me now, because everything that happens to me is because I asked for Him to guide my way. And where I am is either something I need to learn or I need to teach someone else. And it's all for His glory.